All right, welcome to the Magnetic Podcast. This is our 9th episode. I'm your host, Steve Schmidt. We call it the Magnetic Podcast because we don't have a name yet. We wanted to get 10 people, and I wish I could say this was intentional, where I sat down and made a list and I sat and meditated on it, but it was really people as I ran across them, I'd go, hey, shit, you. Oh yeah, Mark Smith, you. Gabriel Lulo, you. Because I didn't know. And then I got to tell this story, and it's the truth. We were running a test, and it was an accident. And a bot went out to somebody who I absolutely would consider somebody who I look up to and a friend is Rob Jeppsen. And Rob said, hey, man, yeah, I already do podcasts. You were on it, remember? And I said, I'm so embarrassed, Rob. I said, that shouldn't have gone out to you. We scrubbed the list. And he said, it's all good. And I said, but I want you on my podcast. I don't want to sell you a podcast that our company does. And he said, sure. And Rob and I had a chance to talk backstage. And you'll see in the next 30 minutes, you'll hear and see why you don't want to go anywhere. We're going to talk about, elite was the word that I said to Rob. I said, when I did my, 20 minutes of pre-research and sat and just thought about it, elite stood out. Rob doesn't take, I want to be good isn't something that Rob is really going to tolerate. He wants great. And Rob hasn't always been on the great side of life, and he's had a lot of punches thrown in his face that he's overcome. And to me, that's the commonality that's so interesting in those people who are coaching people to be great. Typically, I've overcome at least one significant obstacle in their life, because how the hell can you teach me to when you haven't been? So, Rob, hopefully I gave you enough runway to feel good about being here, that you made a good decision. Welcome to the Magnetic Podcast.
Are you kidding me? It's my honor to be here. I might be the world's biggest fan of yours, my friend. And yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm excited to join you. I'm grateful for being with you. I'm a fan of what you're doing, and I'm ready to dive in.
Let's dive into what you do first. I'm going to describe it. Correct me if I'm wrong. You work with people who are leaders who want to be elite.
Yes, really well said.
What does elite mean? What does elite mean?
Elite means people who choose not. Let me back it up. I believe that talent is a gift, but growth is a choice. And elite leaders don't stop at where their talent is. They can blow past talent and choose growth over grind. And every one of us have different talent levels. Elite leaders don't let talent determine where they're going to go. They choose growth over talent. And that's what it means to me.
I want to get your thought on this quote I heard this morning, because it goes really in tandem with that. Jocko Willingham,
love him,
in the book Extreme Ownership, said something along the lines that this gentleman quoted. It was on the Joe Rogan podcast. I do 2X lessons for 2 hours in the morning because I figure I'll get a master's degree every 3 months. I figure you'd be okay with that. As I'm listening to him, he says, own it, but don't hold it. Own it, but don't hold it. And I thought, God, I like that, right? In AA, they say, like, if I give it to you, you got to pay it forward. They said, own it, but don't hold it. Like, don't be so close to the chest that you go, I got it, and get the hell away. And I love that, because I'm assuming, Rob, you are dealing with these people who are paying you a lot of money to coach them to get somewhere. And they're going to be working with you and looking in your face, but they're also going to probably be looking down at material that you've given them. And that material is very expensive, because it's up to them on what the ROI is.
100%.
How does that feel to you to be putting out content with a question mark at the end of the ROI formula? Because we all do it, right? You know your shit's good. You know if somebody does it, you probably tweak it all the time. How does that feel to have them own the output?
To me, it feels great. Here's what it means. I got to be really selective on who I work with. Here's why. Common knowledge does not equal common practice. Fair? And I make a lot of content like you. Like I said, I'm a fan of your stuff. Sometimes because I speak a lot and I share a lot, and because part of it is I feel a responsibility to give back to our leadership community. I feel a strong responsibility there. But I like it. Like, for instance, I don't do like short-term deals with people. When someone wants to work with me, if they're not willing to make a 1-year commitment, I won't work with them for the very reason that you just talked about. Because there are no silver bullets for leaders, especially in sales. I started only working with sales leaders, Steve, and now I work with leaders of all kinds all around the world. That's part of what I like, is I like having the confidence that the stuff is good. Everybody implements it different ways. Like, here's what I would tell your listeners. If anybody says my way is the only way, you should run like hell from them. Yeah. A great coach should be able to take what I like to look at as frameworks, principles, and then we should be able to make them work for you probably better than they worked for me. Okay. And I love that. So if I don't find someone who's willing to take the long look, if they're looking for a silver bullet, I am the wrong person for you. In a year, you can make changes. In a month, it's hard.
How do you train mindset?
That's where I start every single time. So glad you brought that up. It will surprise, maybe not. The elite leader, it's mindset, then skill set, then performance. And I spend the most money. I have 3 coaches I hire every year. My most expensive coach is my mindset coach. He trains me. I spend over 50 grand a year with this person. And it's because it's so important. I had to pull myself out of really negative places. Like, I know what it feels like to not want to wake up in the morning. I know what that feels like. Okay. And when I first hired this guy, he said, how hard you work doesn't matter. How good you are and talented you are doesn't matter. What you do between the 6 inches between your ears is the only thing that we need to talk about. Training mindset is hard. So I'm going to tell you this. It's the thing nobody goes to. Everybody, I look at this DNA of elite leadership. There's a triple helix. Here are the 3 strands. It's mindset, then skill set, then performance. Everybody goes to performance because that's how we get comps. That's how we get judged. That's how we get promoted. That's where all the pressure is. We only go to skill set if something's broken usually. And then we're looking for a silver bullet. And hardly anybody goes to mindset because usually it comes down to, Steve, something like the Rob Schneider character in The Waterboy, Adam Sandler's movie. He's going, you can do it. And we become this, you can do it, guys, with pom-poms. And that's all we can do. And I think there's at least 4 things that we do. If you want to, I can spit them off really fast.
Please
on mindset.
do.
Yeah. First thing we got to do is learn to think bigger, really, really fast. And if you want more, I will give you ways to have your listeners get access to some of this content for free. Okay.
Please do.
You got to learn to think bigger. The most powerful words in any language are the words that follow these 2 words. I am, then fill in the blank. I am what? The reason that most people don't grow more than 2, 3, 4% in a year, they take a 4%, 5% raise, is because they have this, I am the person that I was for the last 30 years. I drive this kind of car. I live in this kind of house. I hang out with these kinds of people. I am X. If you can teach the people on your team, and if it starts with you, you can start being bold about what goes after I am. You could say, I am facing a difficult economy. Or you could say, I'm going to have the best year I ever had. Here's an example. Exactly a year ago, it was a year ago today, I celebrated a major accomplishment. My business had hit a certain amount. My mindset coach had worked with me, and I'm a big believer in the if-then. If I do this, then I expect this to happen. That's a mindset tool, if-then tools. If this, then this. And so I had 4 if-thens. If I do this, I should accomplish this. And then if this, boom, boom, boom. And at the end, he's like, what's a ridiculous car that you don't think you'd be ready, that would be hard for you to be able to buy 1 year from now, Rob? I said, easy. It's this Range Rover tricked out this exact way, but I would only do it if I bought it cash. He's like, great. So that's the final if then. If I can do it with cash and have this much. A year ago today, I bought that car. Okay. I did that in 14 months. Here's a really important part of the story, Steve. When I got to it and I had the cash and all of the things that were my if thens, I called Tim, my coach, and I said, I value the cash more than the car. He's like, why? He's like, I said, the economy is going to be bad. He goes, oh, so you're changing your I ams. Instead of I am going to have my best year, it's I am getting ready to weather a storm. I'm like, oh, that's right. And he's like, let's go through your clients. Who's going to fire you if the economy goes bad? I'm like, none. They're going to probably need more. He's like, He's like, go buy the freaking car. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. I'm not going to.
Swear
he's
all
like,
the fucking time.
He's like, that's what he said. He goes, go buy that fucking car. Send me a picture and stop being a pussy. That's what he said.
There you go.
That's exactly what he said. And so I did. And
good coach.
Yeah. And so that's the first one. You got to teach yourself to think bigger. I could go long. We have just a few minutes. So I'm going to stop on that. What goes after I am? You should have 4 or 5 I ams. That's number 1. Number 2, think different. Everybody should look at their keyboard. I'm holding my keyboard up if you're looking at the video. And when I say QWERTY, you probably know what QWERTY is, right,
QWERTY
Steve?
keyboard, top left.
QWERTY keyboard, top left.
Blackbird.
I love asking my clients, do you know why it's laid out as QWERTY? Do you know why, Steve?
I have no idea, to tell you the truth.
This is going to be great for your listeners, okay? Let's get in our hot tub time machine, shall we?
Let's do it. Let's go back.
Let's go back to the 70s, but I'm not talking about the 1970s with Led Zeppelin.
I thought we were smoking dope. I thought that'd be fun.
Let's go, man. Okay. A little Maui Wowie is my choice.
Yeah, let's do it.
We're going to the 1870s when the first typewriter was released by the Remington Corporation. And the first keyboard was laid out A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, all the way to Z. Here's what they found. I had to learn how to type on those old typewriters where you push the button, and the iron bar would fire it to hit the paper.
Yeah.
Think about Q, R, S, and T, for example. Those 3 letters are used in the same word all the time. First.
That's right.
Fast, stuck, etc. And when they would type those metal bars, if they were close together, they would jam. And so if you look at your keyboard, And you say, does it look like there's any rhyme or reason on how this keyboard was laid out? It looks like it might have been intentionally random. And that's actually true. They did a study in 1874. What are the least commonly used letter combinations? And that's how they laid out the QWERTY keyboard.
Wow.
Now, here's what's interesting, Steve. 150 years later, we're still typing on something that was set up to avoid jamming of iron bars. Every leader that listens to your show, if you're fortunate enough to work with Steve, you and Steve should be talking about how do we think different in our approach to content? How do we think different into our approach with our teams? If you cannot start creating this culture of thinking different, I was doing a leadership team in Chicago about a month ago, and we were working on this. And we identified the 4 most important things. I said, okay, here's how we do it. Let's do a workshop on how do we think different. I put them into groups. It was silent, Steve. It was silent. Finally, the VP of sales looked at me. He's like, Rob, how much time do we have on this? Because thinking different is hard. It's so hard. Those are the first 2. The last 2 are think rationally. If emotion is the person that brings information to you, we usually make poor decisions. So Tim taught me E plus R equals O, event plus response equals outcome. We do not compete in life on the events that happen to us. We choose the outcomes we want, and we compete in life on the R's that we choose. To all of your listeners, if you are not getting the O you want, don't hope for a better E. Choose a better fucking R. Okay?
Hell yeah.
That's how you compete. You compete in life by saying, okay, I can get to the point where every event can be positive or negative. No, they're all neutral. I'm like Neo in the Matrix. The bullets come, I can put my hand up, I'll look at it. I know what my R is. If you learn how to do that, there is no challenge you can't overcome. And the last one, think intentionally. You've got to learn to use reflection. And then I'll get off this mindset thing, because if you do those 4 things, you're going to get a bulletproof titanium grade mindset. My last appointment every week is with myself. Not enough leaders, just like not enough leaders do IMs. Not enough leaders are intentional about thinking different. Why? Because we still are doing QWERTY. Every one of you have at least 5 QWERTYs inside your organization. I promise you, you'll find them and it'll make you laugh. Once you learn that every E that comes doesn't have to hurt you, you can win, then you can have the power of reflection. We need to look back and ask the 3 reflection questions. Question 1, what did I accomplish? When I look back over the week, I should be able to have something I accomplished every day. I look for 5 accomplishments, and I have a Google sheet where I chart them. Steve, I have multiple years of weekly accomplishments, and you have no idea how energizing that is to look at that.
I love that.
Number 2, what did I learn? So give yourself credit on the accomplishments. Feel good. Pat yourself on the back. Go celebrate. I collect watches and I collect pens and different things. I'm really into the celebration business because they become mementos or trophies of things that matter. And then the second was, what did I learn? And that's also an energizer to say, wow, I learned something. But question 3 is the one that fuels mindset and fuels energy. Yeah. What will I do different as a result? So now I look at next week, next 2 weeks, and I say, how am I going to replicate, or how am I going to apply this lesson? And when you start thinking intentionally, think bigger, think different, think rationally, think intentionally, your listeners, be it salespeople or CEOs, I've built and sold a few companies. Mindset is more important than in any of the other skill sets that you have. If you can have people have bulletproof mindsets, there is no limit to where they will go. Do not make the mistake. Here's my final one. Managers they're good at creating new activities.
Oh, we love it.
Elite leaders are good at creating new possibilities, baby. Create new possibilities, okay? Those people go places other people don't have. They just think they got lucky. And those people, they know, nope, I did that because I created new possibilities. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. You asked me my favorite question, so I'm sorry.
Well, number 1, this is your soapbox, so you're not getting off anything. Number 2, we're going to take this into a place where the listeners are going to want to keep listening, because there are some people naturally out there who are doing this, right? They're just going, yeah, Rob, I get it, right? Number 1, I can't afford elite coaching, Rob. Number 2, sounds great. I got kids and they're all up my ass, or one of my kids is sick. Rob, that you took the first thing you said, and I want to pause on this. Everybody hears this very quick, because you adapting your own regimen. I can see you right now, because you had to say, I am stage 4 cancer.
Yeah.
So let's talk through that, because I don't think that you probably had 100% on that test. I don't know how to better say it, Rob.
I went through some rough times. I had a really unnecessarily nasty divorce. I won't get into the details, but there were some things that shook me to my core. Like anything that was foundational, it destroyed all of it. It messed up my family. It messed up my approach to faith. It messed up my approach to business. And I was starting from zero. To quote, Steve, you know me a little bit. I love sports. I love music. I love movies. Those are my three metaphors. So I'm going to go to music. Tom Perry, I was free falling, baby.
Yeah, there we
And,
go.
but got going again and things were going. I got out of the darkness. My business was going crazy. My customers were getting promoted. My customers were selling their businesses. The businesses I worked with are having the greatest years in their company history. It was awesome. All along the way, I started having a lot of pain. And long story short, I finally went to a doctor and he said, "You got colon cancer, man." And I said, "Okay, so
Stage 4.
well, that's the thought." Yeah, they said,
Yeah.
you should have been here 2 years ago. Stage 4, metastasized. It's in your bloodstream everywhere. It's in your liver. It's everywhere. And I said, "Well, I don't want to sit in a hospital room the rest of my life." They said, "Rob, I got news for you. We're not going to offer one to you. We can't treat what you have. So our advice is get after your bucket list." That was hard to pull my 4 children around and talk them through that. But
I want
I
to
am.
stop there quick, though.
Yeah.
Rob, I want to point out, you said something that I think is worth pausing on. Your children, you didn't think of your customers first.
Yeah, you're right.
Good.
In fact, Steve, I never told my customers. The one I told them was after it's done, when I came on the other side, which we'll talk about. I'll tell you how I handled that, but I didn't tell them because, again, this is bad.
Yeah.
I didn't want my customers to hedge on me. I was
Sure.
like, man, I have some of the
Is he
largest.
going to be around? Oh my God.
Yes,
What a heavy thought.
I have some of the largest companies in the world that they spend a lot of money with me. And I was like, man, I can't afford to lose my customers because they say, "Hey, Rob, get healthy and then we'll take you back." I couldn't afford that. Here's why. I did an IM. I went back and did my IMs. What am I going to do? Am I going to pout? Am I screwed? I said, no, I am going to do everything I can. And so it started with getting a lot of different doctors to look at me in other parts of the country. I live in Salt Lake City. I went to Florida, Texas, California. I went everywhere. They all said, "Yeah, you're going to die, dude." And so then I
Did you
started
ever
reaching.
break down on the journey? Did you ever just weep,
Yeah. I cried and I
pound
felt
your
sorry for
fist in the
myself
bed,
and
hit a wall?
angry. Why me? What have I done to deserve all this? I finally got through this where they went after all of the things in me and I won and I won and I won and I spent all this money and I lost so many years. I went through so much stress. In fact, the doctor said all that stress of that dark stuff is that it accelerated my cancer. They said, the stress in your life, Rob, you should have been here 2 years ago. Yeah, I broke down, Steve. And it took me really having to be intentional, dude. I had to be intentional. I'm like, okay. I called Tim, my coach. I'm like, okay, you have got me ready for this. Let's go. Turns out he's battling cancer as well. And we did E plus R equals O. Okay, Rob, what's the O that you want? I said, my O is to not go away as a pussy. I don't want to be feeling sorry for myself. I want to go out charging. So we found a treatment in Mexico. They have these med spas, man, these Harvard educated physicians from Mexico that worked here, did residencies here in the United States, and then went back to Mexico. And there's a treatment that was invented in the University of Tokyo about a year ago, not legal in the United States. Had to pay for it in cash, $250,000 to go do it. Insurance won't cover it. They won't let you finance it because I only had a 22% chance of living. They changed my DNA. They went and modified my immune system and created a molecule to kill that cancer. Now, here's what's interesting. It sounds cool, but the downside is if it didn't kill the cancer, it was going to kill me. They gave me 18 months to live. I screwed around for 8 months feeling sorry for myself, Steve, before I did anything about it. It took me that long. When I got to single digits in months left, I was like, I got to do something because I was getting weaker. I was having all kinds of really nasty symptoms. But I made the decision that I was going to chase it. And I found what I thought was the right thing. And the doctors told me not to do it here because the United States doctors said, oh, these foreign med spas, they prey on North Americans that are fearful of their life. And they do things that we don't do. He goes, if it worked, we would do it here, Rob. That's what they said. If it worked, we would do it here.
Except for we're heavily regulated and the drug and pharmaceutical companies control us. Other than that, we would.
So they gave me a 22% chance of making it, Steve.
How did that feel? Did you go, okay, I'm going to do it?
Scared at first. And then I was getting weaker and weaker. Like I would pass out sometimes. I mean, there was a time I was driving my son, and my 16-year-old son and I were in my car, and I woke up and he was like freaking out. He had one hand on my chest and the other hand on the
Oh,
steering wheel,
geez.
like going, Dad, Dad. And I was like, it was bad. And finally I was like, this is not how I want to go out. I would
Yeah.
rather have my 8-10 months go to zero because I was doing the very best I could. I would rather do that, because either way, like if it doesn't work, I'll die, but at least this way I have a
Yeah.
chance. And
Yeah, man.
dude, when I flew to Mexico, Steve, I remember walking around outside that night on my phone, calling each of my kids again, saying goodbye. My senses were alive. I tasted the air different. I felt like I could touch the stars. Like every single reflex was alive. In fact, I'm getting like that feeling as I
Yeah.
tell you the
I can
story.
feel it too.
Yeah. But I had to, man. It was my mindset. I am going to
Mm.
win. It was my youngest son. My oldest three kids were like, Dad, we love you. Thanks for everything. Blah, blah, blah. And I chose to go down by myself because I didn't want to put my kids through that. I didn't want to put them through it.
Yeah.
And my youngest, my 16-year-old, because I do a lot of mindset coaching with my kids, he's like, Dad, we're working on the I ams. I don't want to hear about anything other than I am coming home on Monday. I am doing this. It was awesome. It was a great experience.
Look at you now. You have this story that you're not just coaching people. We all get told in life sometimes that things happen for a reason, and we see things happen and go, no, they don't. Wake up and see 16 people shot in Maine and go, nope, not true. Can't happen for a reason. But I also can't help but think that your mindset, knowing the power of the connectivity of the human body, had a lot to do with that. And I'm very careful on how I speak to that, because number one, I've never survived from cancer. Number two, I've never battled cancer. And number three, I'm certainly not a doctor. I've been through addiction recovery, very different from cancer, but I do know that mindset for me, with significant odds that were like yours, Rob, played a significant role in my stubbornness. I wrote an article about it called "You Have to Admit Complete Defeat."
You
Like,
shared it with me. You
yeah, you're
shared it with
down.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're down on the ground, and I'm like, okay, why does this feel so good? Like you said, you could taste. I was like, why am I so okay being at this point? Do I get off on almost being dead? Am I sick and twisted? Nope. It was just this kind of magical moment of, I didn't need to go and post it on social media. It was mine. And I felt, and I describe, people say, well, do you know God? I said, I know this. I was walking through a forest and I was yelling at God like I've done a lot. And I was like, well, okay, the typical Hallmark movie, show yourself, because I'm 10 days into recovery and I feel like I deserve that moment, right? Whatever it was, allowed it to happen. Walked
Wow.
around the corner. There was light shining through the trees in just a way that I took a picture, and it doesn't look the same, of course, where I saw finally the ability to see something that I couldn't before. And I could
Wow.
just pause and go, oh, I'm not thinking about, will I have a job when I get back? I'm not thinking about, will I slam a drink the second I get out of the parking lot? I'm just okay with being right here. And I was okay the next 20 days not getting out of there. And for a sales guy to white knuckle it when you're not dying of something because you find out you're living, and then you want to stay where you're at going, I think I like it here because I actually get a chance to feel life a little bit. And my cell phone's not dinging and my email's not going off. Now, through yours, this is my point. Your life probably didn't stop. You got a business to run. When you stop working, you stop making money. Tell me how that went, brother, because if you're passing out while you're driving, and I'm imagining teaching at companies like IBM are not easy to do.
You're right. I ran out of gas faster. I had to get really intentional with time. So I was very careful about scheduling my coaching because, like, again, we talk about content and use of time. I would coach in the mornings when I was strongest.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't overdo it. I limited my number of morning sessions. I usually start at 7 a.m. my time because I got people on the East Coast. I'm in Mountain Time. So
Yep.
sometimes 6 a.m. To make their 8 a.m. So I didn't do that. I changed my window of coaching. And in the afternoon, I never coached anybody. I just did content creation and follow-ups. And I tried to repurpose some of my other stuff instead of coming up with brand new stuff. I was very careful, though, because Steve, they pay me good money. And this is really part of who I am.
Yeah.
If someone's going to pay me to be involved in their success, I owe it to them. I'm one of these people. My favorite 3 words as a professional are and then some. Give them what they expect and then some. Do what they need and then some. Meet their expectations and then some. And
Where does that come from? Where does that
I
come
don't
from?
know. I
Because
heard it from
nobody
my
has that.
I
Nobody
heard
has
that from
that
my
work
father.
ethic.
My
No, I'm
father
just saying
taught
the
me.
work ethic, Rob. You have the work ethic. Most
But
people don't.
well, I don't know. I just know that I care a lot. I give a shit.
It's
I always
just
tell
you.
my
It's just
I
who
tell
you
my
are.
customers, Steve, I'm like, if you and I work together, you would hear me say it. I love being on Team Steve. So
Yeah.
I tell my people,
Feels
I'm
good
on
to
Team
hear.
Nicole.
I'm
I'm on
smiling
Team
hearing it.
Nicole. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
let's
so if I'm
go.
going to be on team, if I'm going to be on team whoever, then I got to bring it. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
did. I was very careful with it. And after it was done, like, this is one thing I didn't tell you. Like, I got my finance guy. I said, listen, this company pays me X amount of money. They need this much of a refund pro rata. And I pulled all the money. So all of my clients, if I died, would get that money was set with refunds and a letter from me explaining what happened. And then after I made it back, then I called every single one of them. Now,
Totally.
here's a really interesting lesson. One of my clients, I don't think it's a problem for me to share this name. It's one of the most admired sales orgs in North America. It's Waste Management, WM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Here's why. This is a great story that I didn't tell them. They're my third largest customer. And I didn't tell them. I got on the phone with the guy that I work with and I told him. I said, first, I hope that along the last few months you haven't seen a decline in my performance. He goes, none at all. He's like, but I'm angry and I'm happy. He said, A, I'm happy we're having this conversation. I'm so glad. He goes, but at our company, WM, our number one culture element is people first. And it's not just our employees or our customers, it's also our partners, of which you are one. I've worked with them for a decade. Okay.
Yeah.
And he said, we go to bat for our people, and you didn't give me the chance to go to bat for you, Rob. And I was like, I said, I just didn't want you to hedge. I said, I've worked with the company for a decade. This person had been in his role for less than a year. I was
Yeah.
still rebuilding that relationship. I said, I didn't want you to wonder. He's like, no strings attached when you work with me. And that was a huge lesson for me. I aced people out and I did it alone and I didn't have to. And it would have been so much better had I trusted people. Because the reason I aced them out, Steve, is I had so much betrayal and negativity with the other things I talked about
Past your life. Yeah.
that I was not trusting people who deserve to be trusted.
Yeah.
So
Let's talk about that for a second, because now you are the student again, right? Life is serving you this really interesting lesson of don't go at it alone. You know, who is telling you I'm on team fucking Rob?
yeah,
You know, you were
nobody.
probably
I didn't
telling
let him.
yourself. Yeah, you
It
wouldn't let
was
him
just
in.
me. I wouldn't
Yeah.
let him in. Like, so you mentioned a guy that we both have a lot of respect for, Mark Smith.
Yeah.
I love that guy. Like, if
Yep.
all of your listeners, go back and listen to anything Steve shares with you from Mark Smith, because you need to listen to it. I shared with Steve I shared with Mark what happened. He called me instantly and he said, why didn't you let me in? I would have been there for you. I would have been on Team Rob. That's a really good lesson. Sometimes when we're founders and CEOs, or sometimes we're working with companies that we've got a lot of pressure to grow them,
Yeah.
we do this, we take it all on, and it's unnecessarily hard. I think that one of the most important things, we talked about mindset, we've talked about belief, we've talked about some of those things. Learning to allow people to help you is an important skill, because you can't do it yourself. It doesn't scale, Steve. It doesn't scale,
Yeah.
and it's not healthy. It's not
Yeah.
healthy.
And it's not fun, is it? I mean, life is
No.
not. I brought a co-founder 2 months ago, and I
Okay.
said, people said, why? And I said, I wanted company. I don't like doing it alone. And I was honest, right? I wish I had a better answer for him, but I just said, I just like doing it with somebody else. And I'm so glad I made the decision. So glad I made the decision, right? You've been through some tough shit in life. It's natural for guys like maybe us who have been through maybe call it a failed marriage to not want to
That's me.
open up and trust again, to
Yeah.
not want to and I'm just going to talk about this out loud because it's my show and I can. There's also
I love it.
this expectation that, I'm a pretty masculine man and there's some things that I correct in my approach to life, but I'm also very sensitive, right? And I think that men are very confused right now, and especially men who have maybe been through a relationship that's failed and sort of looking at the world and saying, well, what do you want from me? And men are maybe born with, I'll give you a good example, the ability to perform certain athletic movements better than women. And that's not an opinion. That is, I guess, rooted in science, call it sports education. It's getting to a point, I promise, Rob, where I think a lot of people kind of go, well, am I supposed to be timid? Am I supposed to be sensitive. If I say, let's fucking go, is everybody going to call me a toxic male? Am I now a narcissist? There's so many words, and we live in this society where largely online people want to label people and say, Rob Jeppsen is this, Steve Schmidt is this. And I feel that they want to take a positive or a negative stance with you and evaluate you pretty quickly, where they go, Rob Jeppsen, is he for me or not? Don't think so. Moving on, right?
Fair.
How does that feel to you, knowing that there's only a few customers you really need to connect with, but you need to be talking to a lot of them? Because I'm guessing your average deal size is between 150 and 250K. Probably close to 8 to 10 a month.
I have some of those. I have some of those. And then I have the individuals that it's less than that. But yeah, I don't work for average prices. You're right. I don't. So filtering, right? That's the word
how do you filter out the noise and the things that don't matter to Rob?
Well, I mean, it's going to sound really bad, but I think one of the biggest lessons I had to learn is I don't need to be for everyone. I know I'm not for everyone. I'm a 1 or a 0, and I'm okay with that, man. I would rather be a 1 or a 0. If I don't want everyone to be offensive. I don't want to piss you off. I will sometimes, but it won't be on purpose. Usually, I'm okay, man. I used to worry too much about that. I used to worry so much about making sure I had the widest band of lovers in the love group. Yeah. You know what? I don't want to have haters if I can help it, but I also don't care, Steve. I just don't care.
They don't pay your bills anyways, do they?
I don't care. Yeah. I know exactly who I want. I work with this kind of organization and this kind of a person, and they value X. And if they don't value X, then they're not going to value me. And that's okay. You know what I'm saying?
Magnetic. You're magnetic, Rob. You're the reason I named my company. Because people used to always tell me, Steve, you're magnetic. And I'd say, well, God, it pisses some people off. They go, yeah. You're kind of unapologetic. And I'm like, well, I want to be nice. I don't want to piss anybody off. And then I realized that when you live in a world of vanilla, that nobody wants that either. You know, everybody is prone to say, and maybe this isn't right. I don't know, humans, right? Given this judgment capability, where I, within a very short span of time, can say, Rob Jeppsen is for me or not for me. And you've gauged your business in such a way to target it to get you the results that you need. Hopefully never less, and probably not a ton more because you're just one person. How do you do that? Because I think when people think about content, they think, unfortunately, and it goes along with it, am I going to make money if I produce content? Yeah. And if I make money, how much more can I make?
So I use content a couple ways. Yeah, content helps me capture attention. The first thing is we're in the attention business. And so I do that with a podcast. I do that. I have a community called Sales Leadership United where I believe it's the largest collection of leadership assets. So I take all kinds of stuff from short snippets of my podcast to full trainings. And for a small amount a month, you know, I have a person on my team that they just run that, and that now has 1,500 people. And so I'm repurposing. So one is attention. The other one, though, is building good content in a generic way is a good way for me to scale, because I can say, okay, for example, when I work with a sales leader, the first thing we always start with is, what is your leadership philosophy? And most people haven't ever really been intentional about building that. I've never found one. I've been doing this for years. I've worked with thousands of leaders. I'm waiting for someone to say, here is mine. What do you think? We've always built it. Here's why. I want you to think of it as a sandwich. The bottom bun and the top bun hold all the meat and veggies in the middle. The bottom bun is your approach to your leadership philosophy, how you show up for your people. The top bun is your operating rhythm. What do they see? Can you make a rhythm that people can dance to? Okay. And then everything in the middle are the competencies, how you build capacity, how you use clarity, how you create culture. They're all very specific. We want to build the world's greatest leadership burger. So I have starting tools, pieces of content to start them on the journey. But then we want to go to places that no one's ever gone. So it's your philosophy, because your philosophy will lead to your rhythm. And your rhythm are going to require your competencies for the business that you're in. And so I use content to A, get attention, but then B, use it to scale fast. I use it to go on a customized journey that is fueled by frameworks. And that's how I use content, those two ways.
Let's talk about content and learning and development. Salespeople, content is synonymous with posting on LinkedIn, which is very interesting because that is the one form of content. You make content that people have paid you money for, and now you're delivering it to them. How do you gauge the quality of that? Is it feedback from the users? Is it benchmarks within the industry? Walk us through that. Good.
I don't care much what the benchmarks from the industry say, because the industry is geared towards having people be average. Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
It is. It's geared towards having people, average. They use. Nobody wants to be average on the stack rank. We always want to be the person that's at the top, right?
Of course.
I gauge it based on impact. I get, like, right now, as we record this, it's October, and I'm getting hired by a lot of people for sales kickoffs.
Yeah.
And I'm not the person that says, here's my speech this year, hope you like it. Part of what I do is I learn what their objectives are. I'm doing this for a large organization right now. Just got done. We said, what are your objectives? What are you trying to get done? Tell me about the issues or the whatever. And then I go away and I come back and say, this is what I propose to you. Now, I'm going to base it on some of the elements that I already have, but I'm going to tweak those. Yeah. And so I only base it on what comes back from my client. Was it memorable? Right? That's the first thing. It's got to be memorable, because otherwise they're going to forget it. Number two, I always do it every time. I try to make sure when I speak to a sales group, I'm trying to drive them back to their leaders with their own personal plans that will fuel coaching. So number one, did they like it? Did it score well? Number two, did your coaching change because of it? That's where I look at it. And then number three, if your coaching changed, ultimately, did you start to see outcomes start to change as a result? But I look at outcomes later. Outcomes don't ever change fast. Like, one of the things I learned as a leader is lazy leaders, they just look at the outcomes and the results that are measured. I believe there's 20 leadership choices every leader has to make. Like, the first one is choose your future over your fears. The second one is choose growth over grind. Number 13 is we got to choose that observed data is greater than or equal to than recorded data. So that's what I look at it. Elite leaders have learned the stuff that shows up in the numbers is the tip of the iceberg, but what sank the Titanic is the 80% that's below the water. And so we have to be able to create moments of observation. We have to be able to understand what are the things that makes that thing show up. And I use content to address very specific things that makes that iceberg float higher.
That's awesome. I want to ask one last question that will peel back the onion and bring this thing full circle and walk around how people can contact you. Because if you're still listening now, it is likely because you've heard something where when Rob talks, you get excited and you get probably focused and you bring things into clarity. Because when we hear this, Rob, we all want to be great. I think we, at least at a very young age, like we all thought like, hey, I can be great. I want to be great. And then we get to be adults and we go, man, I want to be great, but fucking it's hard. I want to be great, but I wish I lived in Scottsdale, Arizona because it's warmer. I want to be great, but my marriage is limiting because, my partner does this and I could do that. My kids limit me from doing this. Gosh, I wish I could wake up at 5 like you, Rob, to get 2 hours in, but I'm up till midnight every night. I just can't get to sleep. And there's a lot of these things. And I know that we know what you're going to say. We know you're going to say, how's that working out for you? I think it's that we don't want to assess our current state. We just want to get better. We don't want to talk about the part that's probably the most important, which is why are you here right now, Steve? How did you get here? So walk me through that. How important is to you how they got to where they are right now versus to where they want to go with you?
So understanding what got you here is important because it sets up what's next. What got you here ain't going to get you there. And so I speak in stories and metaphors because I'm an experiential person. Have you ever watched a space shuttle launch, Steve?
Not millions, 10, 20, 30.
But plenty of times. Yeah. So let's think through what happens. The first thing that you do is you see the smoke start to come, right?
Yep.
And you see it wobble just a little bit. And then you start to hear the right? Because the speed of light's faster than the speed of sound. And then it slowly starts to move up that launch pad. And then when it clears the launch pad, it goes in that gentle arc. And I still always think about that tragedy when I was a young boy in a library watching that space shuttle tragedy. And I always wonder, what's going to happen? And it drops that booster rocket, then it goes to outer space. And when it gets to outer space, then it does the thing. Here's the lesson. Most people don't know this. It uses more fuel in the first 60 seconds getting off the ground to get to that gentle arc than when it's in outer space to circumnavigate the globe one time.
Holy cow.
More fuel to get off the ground than when you are out here to go around the world one time. There's a term for it. It's called escape velocity. I like to help leaders and people who want to be elite create escape velocity from where you are. Because if you're going to get off the ground, you're going to have to burn. So that means you're going to have to say, I know I'm going to have to burn. I can't hope for it. I'm going to have to burn. If I want to get to outer space, I'm going to have to burn. But then when I'm there, it gets a lot easier. I have this beautiful view until, Steve, you want to go to the moon. And when you're going to leave that, then you're going to have to burn again. And then you can land on the moon and you can colonize it until it's time to go to Mars. And then what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to fucking burn one more time. And so if I can get people to understand, I'm glad that you're on Earth or in the orbit or on the Mars or whatever. I'm glad we're here. But one of the hardest leadership challenges is working with high performers because they just say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's wrong. Mm-hmm. Our job is to say, where are we going and what does the burn need to look like? So that's what I look at. Where are we going and what does the burn need to look like? Because just like a rocket scientist can calculate what the escape velocity is to get that rocket off the ground, we as leaders of teams, we have to help the people we lead be able to calculate. Because I don't want you to work hard, grind, cross your fingers, and hope. Yeah. Hope ain't a strategy. Yeah. I want you to intentionally, purposefully, predictably burn in a way that overcomes escape velocity and takes you to a place that other people think you just must have got lucky.
That's a term that's new to me. I think if we all look at that, you answered the question, which is fit. Let's get away from it. You know how you got there. You'll know if you're going there again. And I guess people are probably more honest with themselves than they are with you. If we all think about like the truths that are revealed to you, you probably can see those weaknesses if they're not honest with you, if they're not saying what their limitations are. I'm assuming they all show up very excited for the first session, Rob.
Yeah. And if they don't change, then I actually have fired customers. I give them their money back. If they don't, listen, man, I'm not in the business of just taking money. I'm in the business of burning, dude. I'm in the business of overcoming escape velocity. And sometimes our rockets misfire, and that's okay.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
We get to do it again.
Sometimes, we got to go again.
Yeah.
So this will be a good way for us to finish. My favorite metric that nobody talks about. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go final story. We're going to go back to the 70s. This time it's the 1970s. My father was the engineer that invented the laser printer for Hewlett Packard. It's a story. I was surrounded by innovation my whole life.
Hold on. Say that again for our listeners. Your father was
the engineer who invented the laser printer at Hewlett Packard. He tells the story of talking to Dave Hewlett, Bill Packard, and saying, hey, I have this idea of building a printer that sits on a desk. And they're like, we're a calculator company and a mainframe computer company. And anyway, we moved to Boise, Idaho, where their printer division ended up, and he ran R&D for the rest of his career there, building prisms. In the early 80s, he would take me to his office, and I loved it because I would go there and I would see something I'd never seen anywhere else, but only heard about, Steve.
Yeah.
Computers. They had computers there.
Yeah.
And it's the early 80s. And these engineers would write games for him. So my brother and I would go, and they had this awesome game. We had the keyboard, they had the big monitor, and had this mountain on it with a tank on either side. And we had to shoot over the mountain and hit the tank on the other side. It's called artillery, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. And we had two levers. One was force and one was angle. But what it did was it would shoot and would track the trajectory. And trajectory is the metric. Here's Rob Jeppsen's definition of why trajectory is so important. Trajectory is the metric that will predict where something lands.
Okay.
It'll predict where a bullet lands. It'll predict where when a pitcher throws a baseball or a football, it'll land. It predicts when a baseball comes off a bat where it'll land. Mm-hmm. It predicts where a glider will land. Okay. Trajectory predicts all of that. It'll also predict where your team will land. And so I want you to start looking at trajectory. Most people look at point in time. They look at the score. Okay.
Yeah.
Score plus trajectory equals situation. Start looking at situations. Okay. And start changing trajectory. Trajectory is force and angle. Force is your work ethic. You can only work so hard. Angle is your focus points.
Yeah.
Start changing trajectories and you will start changing outcomes.
I just feel energized. You've done this to me yet again. I'm sitting here going, I've never been more excited to go call a lift and go to the dealership to go get my truck that I haven't in 2 weeks. So you just get me pumped about everything. I feel like I have no more excuses in life when I'm done talking to you. I also believe heavily in the art of investing into coaching. It's something I did in the last 6 months from a CEO perspective to be better operator of business. You get smart about money, if I'm being honest about you.
Yeah.
My next area is going to be figuring out how to be a good boss and not have to be somebody's friend, because I think that's confusing for a lot of people. And I will admit, to me too, it is still confusing to me. How can I love somebody partially? And I got to be coming to a guy like you for that, because I think that that's something we don't talk about enough, because it's easy to get out and spit out a post on LinkedIn and say, this is how I feel. It's harder to talk to somebody and come up with hearing two different opinions and kind of getting to be okay with it. So I love that you always bring it back to real life. You're not just talking about philosophy on LinkedIn, Rob. If and when those people want to double click into you and get a hold of you, tell our audience exactly how they can schedule some time to chat with you.
Well, first of all, they're in the right spot if they're listening and talking to you. I'm telling you, pick up everything you can from Steve, because I'm a fan. I'm on LinkedIn, Rob Jeppsen on LinkedIn. I host a podcast called the Sales Leadership Podcast. I bring on people like Steve every single week. You can hear from lots of people there. I also have a community called Sales Leadership United. You can go there, and there's lots of leadership assets if you're interested in subscribing to them. That's it. I'm easy.
Yeah.
I love talking shop. If you ever want to talk, send me an email, rob@JEPPG, stands for Jeppsen Performance Group, JEPPG. I'll always respond. I love talking shop with people who are trying to be elite.
Yeah.
If I can ever be helpful, even if it's just to answer a question or two, I'll do it.
Dude, everybody who's listening has got to go back, as we're winding up here and the music's playing on the outro. Like, go back and double click on that one. Save this podcast so when you're on that plane ride and life is hard, you go back and listen to it, because I went from interested to hearing sales advice to feeling like there's frameworks for anything in life, and it's all about my mindset, and not feeling it, knowing it, and still going, well, why the fuck don't we do it if we know it works? And obviously we need people like Rob to help us get there, because the human mind is a very dangerous organ, in my opinion, because it can do a lot of good and a lot of bad, mostly for you and you to you. And fuck what other people can do. You can harm yourself way more than anybody else can, Rob. So I think you start there, and thank you for tackling the toughest subject, which is indeed the one thing between the two ears.
Steve, thanks for having me. I love it. Thanks for having me. This was a great conversation. And if I can ever be helpful to you, I'm the first call you ever need to make, because I'm your biggest fan.
Rob Jeppsen's a man. Peace out, everybody. This is Steve Schmidt with Magnetic.